The Chicago Bulls have a playing game tonight against the Atlanta Hawks, in which the winner of that game goes on to face the loser between the Miami Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers, another game that's going down today. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that game. But before we get into that, I want to talk about what AK and Eversley can learn from the GMs and presidents of other Chicago teams, namely the Chicago Bears and the Chicago Sky. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content. And I want to start it off with this, right? You guys know, for those that don't know, I host Chicago Bears Central, and Chicago Sky Central as well. And those two teams are teams that, very much like the Chicago Bulls, had new GMs and new coaches come in and take over those teams. Now, the coach of the Matt Eberflus of the Chicago Bears, I'm not as high on him. But what Ryan Poles has done with the Chicago Bears, then when you look at what Jeff Pagliosha has done with the Chicago Sky in only 1 year, right? It really kind of brings home kind of the flaws of this current front office. And even though this front office initially, when they came in, did a lot of the same things that Ryan Poles and Jeff Pagliosha did with their respective teams, it's the consistency, specifically from Ryan Poles, we still have to see it from the Chicago Sky, of just staying aggressive, right? So when you look at the two franchises, right, the Chicago Bears, who are set to probably take Caleb Williams number one overall and start off a new part of that franchise, but outside of just that pick or not, Ryan Poles came into the Chicago Bears, cleared out a lot of the bad salary, knew that the team was going to be bad for a while, embraced that, right, said that they were going to rebuild organically through the draft, do those type of things, and then made moves, cleared out a lot of the veterans, aging veterans, still veterans that can perform, some that couldn't, right, cleared out that bad money, replace those with young, promising players. Now he has one of the youngest defenses in the league and one of the most promising defenses in the league on top of that, with an offense that still is rounding out, still has some holes on it, things like that. But it's the vision. Ryan Poles came in with a vision of that team and has executed that vision every step of the way. When you look at AK, much like Ryan Poles, said that he wanted to come in, build through the draft, but admittedly kind of pivoted from it. Now, basketball and football are two different. There's so many players that you need, a 53-man roster in football, right? So even though, trading for Nikola Vucevic for the Chicago Bulls, right, trading for a vet and going older is a lot more, it hurts a lot more than, for example, like Ryan Poles going out and trading for Montez Sweat, even though Montez Sweat's still a dog, right? Like, let's not act like he's aging like Vooch. So it's the future forecasting, right? And that's the part. If you look at anything that I would love AK and Eversley to take from Ryan Poles and what he's done with the Chicago Bears, it's pick a vision, stick to it, execute that vision as best you can, call audibles where you can. Ryan Poles has not been perfect. You look at the Chase Claypool trade, a fail, right? That did not work. You look at most of his first signings that first offseason on those one-year prove-it deals with people like Byron Pringle did not work out. And while AK had more initial success, when you look at him getting Nikola Vucevic, signing Lonzo Ball, signing DeMar, signing Alex Caruso, and that initial success when the Bulls were number one team in the East for a little stretch of time there, then injuries took that down. There was more immediate success for the Bulls. But the pivot game from the Bulls has been terrible, and that's one thing that Ryan Poles has excelled at, right? And that's something that I would love to see adapted, right? Building with a purpose, clearing out bad salary, bad salary doesn't necessarily always mean bad players. It just means looking at where you are, the opportunity you have to really attain something meaningful in the time that salary is around. Those are things that you really have to look at. But also with Ryan Poles, he has not been afraid to make moves that may upset the fan base but improve the team. Same thing with Jeff Pagliosha, right? With the Chicago Sky. He had a finals MVP in Kalia Copper on that roster, came in, inherited a roster much like Ryan Poles that didn't have a whole lot of draft assets because James Wade, the previous GM, traded away a lot of the Sky's future draft capital, and he looked at it and said, "No, we need to get in this draft. We identify a bunch of talent in this draft that we want," and he traded a former Finals MVP, a player who, in their first year of being the true number one with not much else around them, excelled in that role and still said, we're not good enough and I need us to be better, and went out and got two players in Carmelo Cardoso and also Angel Reese that will jumpstart your rebuild. Now, the truth is somewhere in the middle of this, right? We know that AK, and I've said it, is not necessarily a GM that's going to want to go full rebuild. But even in that, you can be meaningful in how and where you build the team at. And that's what I need from AK and Eversley in this. There's a lot to be. Now, yeah, you're not always going to get an Angel Reese. You're not always going to get a Carmelo Cardoso, right? Like the WNBA is its own unique beast as well with the amount of talent they're having in. This year's draft isn't comparable to that. Next year's draft may be closer to what this year's WNBA draft was. But both of these GMs, the things that they did not do that AK seems content in doing is settling for middling success. That is the one thing. If you look at these other two GMs, they do not settle for middling success. And that is the thing that I love about the way that those respective people run their teams. And that's what AK can learn from just the other GMs in Chicago. I joke a lot about how I would love for Ryan Poles to sit down with AK and just be like, son, what are you doing? Right? But I mean that in saying that Ryan Poles has not been a GM that has ever rested on his laurels. He's never been one that's rested in the fact like, oh, well, yeah, I said we were building. It's going to take a few years. It's the settling for just a little bit of monochrome of success, if you even want to label it that, for the Chicago Bulls, it's been frustrating for a lot of Bulls fans, and it's been a huge disappointment. And so I think that you have to look at that part of it as well, and that's where AK has to kind of look and review. Ryan Poles is about to get Caleb Williams. He also traded for DJ Moore. He also got Montez Sweat. He also drafted players that turned into absolute dogs, right? In people like Tyreek Stevenson, having Kyler Gordon there who's rounding out to a damn good player, right? Still got some work to do on that offensive side of the ball for sure, right? Can't take that away or make it seem more than that. But what have we done here? We got Patrick Williams. We got Dalen Terry. We got Ayo Dosunmu, who's a stud, right? We got players that really round out, but they don't seem at that same level, right? Jeff Pagliosha got Angel Reese and Carmelo Cardoso. We don't have that, right? So the not settling for the middling success is the biggest thing that I think in that when you look at those other two GMs just in the city of Chicago. And so that kind of brings it to this. When you look at what AK does, the next kind of big phase of AK, the next wave of the Chicago Bulls is what does AK do to move out of the LaVine, DeMar, and Vooch era, right? There are a couple of different ways, right? Will it be slow and you move off of them over time, meaning that maybe you do let DeMar walk, or maybe you re-sign DeMar, he gets traded down the road. Maybe Nikola Vucevic's contract naturally expires over the 2 remaining years after this season. Maybe you end up keeping Zach LaVine, right, and keeping him as the next phase of things. But will it be a more slower, gradual step off that era as players like Ayo Dosunmu, like Kobe White, maybe even Julian Phillips, ascend to a level to where it's a natural transgression or transition of power? Now, if it is that slower, more steady thing, it's going to be a long, hard road for Bulls fans. Let me be clear here. I'm not saying that that's not the route that they can go. They very well can. It's built organically now, but that means that we're going to be in for about 2 to 5 years, 2 to 4 years probably of what we've had the last 3 years. Now, the other thing is it is slight retool with moving one of the core three this offseason. Now, that could come via letting DeMar DeRozan walk for nothing. That could come via trading Zach LaVine and getting whatever best assets you can get back for Zach and letting the chips fall where they may there. I don't really think Vooch has the chance to be moved, right? But, maybe you can find a deal in which you do move Nikola Vucevic and you entice a team with some future seconds or maybe the Portland pick, which at this point does not seem like it's going to convey anytime soon to the Chicago Bulls. Maybe you look at doing it that way, right? That's another thing. But then a more major retooling is maybe moving 2 of the 3 this offseason. I said a couple of episodes ago that I do not think the future of DeMar DeRozan and the future of Zach LaVine are as linked as what some fans and what I even myself sometimes make it out to be, right? I think sometimes I have the mindset of, well, if you move Zach this offseason, you're probably going to keep DeMar and re-sign him. If you don't move Zach, maybe that means you move on from DeMar. But I think that there is a possibility that you trade Zach LaVine, you look at what you get back with that deal, and you still look at DeMar and say, hey, DeMar, we love what you did. You deserve a contract. We'll facilitate a sign and trade so we can get you the most money back in free agency so you can still get more than what the other team could typically offer you, and we get a little something back, right? Can we get a couple of unprotected second-round picks or something, whatever it is? And that may be also part of the process. Vooch is going to be a little bit harder to move with the guaranteed money, the amount of money, and his performance on the court kind of starting to slide, right? Not kind of, starting to slide. But I think that that's kind of the next big question that faces this front office, and I don't have a clear-cut answer. They could very well run it all back, which is the option that I think most Bulls fans don't want to see, but that is still an option, especially if you're looking at the ascension of Kobe and Io, and you're saying, hey, now adding that to this core, if they can stay healthy, we're going to be a playoff team. We're going to be competing for at least the 7th or 6th seed, which you could talk yourself into. But I think if you look at what those other GMs did, they didn't rest on that chance of that, right? They kind of saw something. They saw opportunity to pivot. They saw opportunity to change the direction of the franchise or the makeup of the roster, and they took that. And the question is AK and Eversley, or are AK and Eversley going to take that opportunity and that chance to do that, or are they going to do what a lot of the more pessimistic Bulls fans say in the comments and stuff of this of, oh, we know they're not going to do nothing. We're going to be the exact same next year. There's more than enough reason to think that, so I can't knock that thinking. Good to great GMs, right? And then we're just talking about really good GMs. Right now, we're just talking about GMs that have had really good maneuvers, right? Because neither the Sky or the Bears have had success yet as far as making it in the postseason, right? Being true contenders. But you just feel better about their future. And that's the thing that AK and Eversley have to find a way to do, in my opinion, this offseason, is find a way to make that future clearer for the Chicago Bulls. And then the last thing in this segment that I want to talk about is, will the Bulls once again regret no movement at the trade deadline? And by that, I mean this. Could DeMar end up walking for nothing? That is outside the Bulls' control. That is still a possibility in this. And then you have that opportunity to look back in that and say, man, we probably should have struck on that. Or maybe you look at the cap savings and say, that's the benefit. Not moving on from Alex Caruso. This is one of the more polarizing questions by Chicago Bulls fans, is that should the Bulls move on from Alex Caruso? You have this sect of Bulls fans that say, hey, Alex Caruso is good. But because he's good, it means that we can recoup some of the draft assets that we lost in building this team because we're not going anywhere meaningful. You have the other Bulls fans that sit in the place of, Alex Caruso is so important to winning, but not only just winning, he's so part of team culture. No, hold on to him if you can, because he's going to be what helps change the mindset and the culture of the Chicago Bulls, right? And on top of that, he's a damn good player who also increased his offensive game coming into this year and did exactly what he said he wanted to do this offseason with becoming a better shooter. So you have those two different mindsets, and then each one has its own level of validity. Well, they're both valid regardless, but they have their own level of it makes sense for where the team may go, right? So it comes down to that. Much like the Bulls do regret, or if they're smart, they should regret, considering the circus that it turned into, not moving on from Zach LaVine at the two prior trade deadlines, when the Knicks did make an offer of multiple first-round picks, because it's going back and forth on if it was 2 or 3, multiple first-round picks, and a package built around R.J. Barrett. While not at all an amazing package that you're looking at and saying, bam, this is great, we're going to be off to contendership. It's a lot better now of deals that have been presented, rumored at least, for Zach LaVine in the market that is there for him now. Striking when the market is hot is important if you're going to move on from your assets. But then again, I guess part of the question that Bulls fans have here is AK even looking to move on from those assets, or should he? And then the last question is, what's the future of Zach LaVine? Those other two GMs, I think the Zach LaVine and Jesus Christ, the Zach LaVine and Kalia Copper comparisons are valid in this sense, right? Kalia Copper reached higher highs than Zach. She was a finals MVP for sure, right? But the Bulls built around Zach because they had to, right? He was the best thing to build around at that point in time. You weren't going to let him walk away for nothing. The Chicago Sky James Wade tried to build a team around Kalia Copper's skill set, that then he left that team. We never really got to see his vision for that team. But the new GM, Jeff Pagliosha, came in and said, Ka's a great player, but because she's great, I'm going to be able to get these assets to help build the roster and the vision that I have for this team. AK and Eversley now sit in that same place with Zach LaVine. Do you move on from him to kind of build a better version of what you want to see here and improve the overall stock of your team? Or do you hold on to that so dearly, right, because you want to stay competitive, right? Jeff Pagliosha was not afraid to not be competitive, and even then, it seems like he built a team that is going to be competitive this season. And same thing with Ryan Poles. He could have tried to build on the fly with coming into the team, having veterans that were still solid in Khalil Mack and other players, right? So that's the thing that you have to look at and say, hey, is that something that we want to keep going and keep trying to compete? Or is it something that we have to rip it out, suck for a little while, right? Suck potentially, and then we can build off something that's more sustainable. And that's the thing that I always go back to with this front office. They are afraid, terrified, it seems like, to take a step back, to take a bigger step forward that is longer term and more sustainable. And that's the questions that we have to ask ourselves now with the Chicago Bulls and this. What can they learn from the other GMs? Just to recap: aggression, not settling for middling success, building with a purpose, clearing bad salary, and most importantly, not being afraid to make moves that will upset your fan base. Now, one could say, well, Haize, in upsetting the fan base, one of those moves are staying competitive. And you're absolutely right. And maybe that's the route that they're going to go that ultimately leads us to where they want to be. Can't see the vision right now, but maybe that becomes a little bit more clear. But guys, let me know what you guys think on that part down below. What do you think the Bulls front office can learn from the other front office around Chicago? And do you think that this Bulls front office is kind of is too fine with settling for middling success and not swinging for the big time success? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. Next up, though, we're going to be talking about we're going to be previewing the game with the Chicago Bulls against the Atlanta Hawks, a game in which this game is about to get exciting, I think, y'all. So the Chicago Bulls played a playing game tonight against the Atlanta Hawks, a game in which I don't even know how this game is going to go. I do think it's going to be a fun and entertaining game. Most matchups against the Bulls and the Hawks are entertaining. Ayo Dosunmu is listed as questionable. Andre Drummond is listed as questionable as well. Seems like Ayo's prognosis is a little bit more favorable than Andre Drummond's. But the Atlanta Hawks are also missing players, right? They're a player that has stepped up, and Jalen Johnson is really going to be missing. He's going to miss this game. Onika is also listed as out. So they are also a hobbled team. Now, in looking at this game, right, the matchups against the Bulls and the Hawks are always interesting because it almost always comes down to the last minute, right? And that's going to be the entertaining part of this. And if Ayo Dosunmu was in the game, seeing that matchup between him and Trae Young is always fun and interesting to watch. But this is, I think, a game that's going to come down to who steps up the most consistently defensively, right? And that's going to be the thing. Who gets the most stops? Now, it could come down to a battle, whether it's versus Trae Young and Kobe White with trading off shots, or DeMar DeRozan and Trae Young. But this is also a team that every time we face them, a role player is basically gone off in this game. So while the Hawks kind of stumble into this play-in tournament, and them and the Bulls have been destined for this whole entire 9-10 matchup, it seems like, for a while, this is still a game where the Bulls got to be on their P's and Q's. And, you got to ask yourself the question this, and, I've battled this back and forth. We talked about it over on Locked on Bulls. What is the most beneficial to the team overall in this? You look at getting postseason experience, right, for Kobe White and Ayo, and especially them being a big part of the game plan. Yeah, they got postseason experience before in that postseason against that we lost against the Bucks, but, they weren't really featured parts of the team and the offense like they are now, right? So, that's if they go on into this game. But this is a game that's definitely a toss-up between both teams. Both teams have had their struggles with injuries. Both teams have had their struggles with chemistry, right? Looking at how much of a different team they are with DeJounte at the point instead of playing off ball that he has to do when Trae Young's back. So those are things that you got to look at in this game and ask if the Bulls can take advantage of. But it's going to come down, I think, a lot to also Billy Donovan and how he manages the rotations. If Andre Drummond does not play in this game, which it looks like it's going to be the case, right? That means that either Javonte Green or Torrey Craig are going to be playing some center minutes. And how those minutes, how the team performs in those minutes and how much of a space they're able to keep between the Atlanta Hawks or close on gaps or things like that are going to be important. Vooch is going to need rest, right? And this is a game and a team that I do think Vooch can be effective against the Atlanta Hawks. But if you're going to have to play him 40-plus minutes, it's going to catch up to him, and it's going to eventually get bad. So you want to look at those things as well. This is, like I said, a fun game I think that you're going to be in store for. Whether the Bulls come out of that or not, it's going to be a fun game to watch. And they're also going to be playing small, right? You look at that. DeAndre Hunter's basically going to be starting at power forward for them, which, take that for what you will. Their backup center in Fernando is 6'9". So, again, the size mismatch, these are teams with very similar struggles right now, but the thing that they have from it is the ability to get hot from three. And that's what the Bulls are going to have to look out for. DeJounte, Trae, and Bogdanovic all can get hot from three. We've seen it before, right? It's happened against us several times. Bogdanovic has absolutely killed us in some games where Trae Young was out. So because they have that upside and because the Bulls' weakness is guarding the three-point line, it's going to be extremely important for the Bulls to be locked in in that battle. And if they can't do it, it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly quick. And let's hope that, the Bulls are prepared for this, and Billy Donovan and this coaching staff have a game plan ready to be. Only thing you've done since your season finale is be able to focus on the Hawks and draw up that game plan. We need to see the execution of that come out, and the players got to be prepared. We cannot turn the ball over. We've been one of the better teams over the course of the regular season at holding on to the ball. We need that all today against the Atlanta Hawks as well. And then hopefully Javante, Alex Caruso, having them out there, their energy, the deflections, with Ayo Dosunmu coming back in that as well. Hopefully the Bulls are able to create enough of that distance defensively to where they can take advantage of that Atlanta Hawks team. But we'll be live here for the pregame, the halftime, and postgame live shows, all live on the channel tonight. So make sure you guys stay tuned in for that. But otherwise, man, I love you guys, man. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.